Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Pope Metallicus, and welcome back to Rock and Roll Religion, where we got something a little different for you guys today. This isn't a band that I know a huge amount about, and these guys are new for me, and I'm not really knowledgeable at the genre, but our guest can tell us a little more about it. So, without further ado, let's introduce her. You know her, you love her. It is Riding Raven. How's it going?
Hello, everybody.
Good to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm glad we could finally make this work. We've been trying to do this episode
I
for what,
know.
2 months now?
Yeah, more or less.
All right. And joining me, as always, is our sentient marijuana plant. So our Nerbs.
What is up? How y'all doing today?
Doing good, man.
Doing well indeed.
And we are covering GOTHMINISTER today. These guys are quite an interesting band, very industrial sounding, from Germany, I believe. Really interesting aesthetic too, where it's very typical of the goth movement, where it's like, kind of businesslike but torn up and kind of horrified a little, which is interesting. It's kind of similar to the black metal aesthetic in some ways.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more symphonic because I don't know how many people know this, but mainstream goth subculture is actually based on music back in the 80s. Like Joy Division, The Cure, Susie and the Banshees.
Yep.
Like original Endless Death had Sue's hair. Unfortunately, it doesn't in the show, which bothers me, but was literally based on a goth from that era. And of course, I'm not necessarily a fan of those bands, which is proof that the subculture has evolved, but I still am quite the metalhead. So I'm so glad I was able to introduce you guys to this band that I really happen to like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm always interested to see new bands and, different sounds and stuff like that, because that's how you develop your own kind of feel for metal and how it affects you. Like you say, the goth subculture kind of spun out of the punks in the 80s. In that it was a little less rebelling against, a little less Black Flag, where they're just rebelling for the sake of rebelling, and kind of had like a different aesthetic and a different idea behind it, which is really cool. And you saw a lot of that in the 80s, from black metal to death metal to thrash to all the power metal, all this kind of stuff. It all just kind of spun out in the mid 80s because there was just so many bands coming out and doing new and interesting stuff. And that continued into the 90s and 2000s a lot, with the more groove and industrial scene, usually in Europe. There's a lot of German industrial.
Yeah.
GOTHMINISTER
is actually Norwegian from started in 1999.
Okay. So they're the same age as
Gothic industrial metal.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has a heavy industrial influence. I can hear a lot of Rammstein. I can hear a lot of Nine Inch Nails. On a couple of their riffs, I can hear a little bit of Static X.
Oh yeah,
I didn't notice that before, but no, you're right. They do have a little bit of that too.
I kind of heard that in some of the songs. I'm like, where have I heard this riff before? Wait a minute.
Static X, yeah. You're right on the money with that. I was wondering. I was like, some of this stuff is pretty heavy. It was like almost like a totally different sound. I didn't even think about Static X.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't listened to them in a while. I grew up when they were coming out, so that was all new when I was a kid.
Yep.
So we all listened to it on the radio and stuff. And I think I even had the first album that they did.
Yeah.
Which underrated. Wayne Static was actually underrated as an industrial artist.
Oh yeah.
I've heard a little bit of Static X before.
Oh, they're pretty good. Pretty good.
They were definitely one of those bands that didn't take themselves too seriously and just did shit for the fun of it, which I always appreciate. Like they weren't chasing a trend. They weren't, doing what everyone else was doing. It was just Wayne Static going out and being a dork on stage.
Yeah. Yeah, even some of the music videos I remember seeing, it was just a little bit goofy.
Yeah, I mean, and
definitely his gelled up mohawk is goofy.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He certainly had an interesting look to him.
I mean, that's definitely on par with some people in the goth, especially the more punk aspects. They will use endless amounts of hairspray and literal glue to make their hair defy gravity.
Yep.
I am not one of those, just so you know.
Yeah, I keep the mohawk to normal proportions. First of all, I can't stand having long hair at all. So, like, if it hits.
And how do you explain the beard?
because that just hangs down and it's just kind of not my way most of the time. Whereas like I think it comes from being a Marine that like as soon as like I can feel hair touch the top of my ears, I'm just done.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sir.
And hair up here is very much different than the hair down here.
Yeah,
Like
and
the
all-
only
and
thing you have to worry about is like this hair.
Well,
not
I'm a
getting in
woman,
your
so
mouth.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, and also, you know, it helps hide the widow's peak. But no, I mean, this band was a really interesting one. This was the first album I looked at from them because I wanted to hear their more recent output and then see how they kind of evolved from there.
Mm-hmm.
Or evolved into that, because it's sometimes just as fun working backwards through a band's discography as it is, you know, going chronologically.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And it's interesting to see, like, you know, where they ended up and then how they came to evolve that sound. And like a lot of their early stuff is a lot more electronic and stuff like that, which I dig. Again, very industrial sounding. Herbs, you put it perfectly when we were talking about it earlier, where it would not sound all that out of place at like a goth night at a local rave club.
Yeah. Some of the stuff I was listening to, it was specifically the album I was listening to, gothic electronic, and what was the last word?
Anthems. Yeah.
Anthems. Yeah, anthems. I almost had it right, and then I just mind part. But yeah, and it's not that it's bad at all, because like, admittedly, I've been to quite a few rave nights, and I'm like, there's been a couple of goth nights I've been to. Like, this is the type of stuff that I would hear. Like, it's good. It's good. Yeah. Although I would admit, there are definitely other albums I would go to and listen to more, just because like electronic music, like I never was really heavy into it. That was just more so like when I was going to raves and, you know, imbibing and being inebriated and things like that. But
but it is tough that you tend to find at a rave.
Well, yeah.
Oh yeah.
My only experience with raves these days are online every Wednesday night on Twitch.
Oh yep. But yeah, no, it's fun. It's fun to listen to for sure, and definitely different than the newer singles that they had recently put out. So
Pandemonium, I think, is amazing.
Yeah, I haven't heard that one yet. They have another one coming out.
They have one.
In October.
This is your darkness is the second song they released from their upcoming album.
Yeah, it sounds like the album's going to come out in October.
I think so, just in time for Halloween.
Absolutely. So perfect, you know, synchronization of events here.
But yeah,
a goth band releasing a new album in October.
I would not be surprised if this band has performed in Mera Luna at some point. And for those of you who don't know, Mera Luna is the biggest goth festival in the world, and I want to go so badly.
Oh yeah, I mean, like I'm right there with you with like some of the other German festivals like Wacken or Bloodstock. It's like I want, like when I see some of those band lists, I'm like, I want to go so bad.
I just want to go because it's a goth con.
True.
I never get to go to goth con.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. For like all the other fandoms, you have like conventions and stuff like that. Even the anime community has those.
Yeah,
has
Germany
like, you know,
has
Anime Matsuri and stuff like that.
I can't go because it's in Germany.
Yeah. But I mean, and then for metalheads, like, you know, we have the shows and the festivals, and that's what we get.
Yeah.
And the festivals are really cool because you will get people from all over the world come and kind of show up.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But no, it's like the festival atmosphere, and you know, if you guys have never been to a metal show, as long as you're, you know, not afraid of crowds or aren't uncomfortable with people being around you and getting pushed and shoved all the time, it's such a freaking great experience to go to shows and just be part of the freaking scene.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Especially because I mean, you feel the music at a show in ways that you can't even describe.
Well, partly because it's super loud.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're like when they're hitting a bass drum, hitting that bass drum, you can feel that percussion.
Oh yeah.
Especially with, like, you know, certain bands like Amon Amarth or Slayer. I actually saw both of them together on
Slayer. Sorry, I had
to. Somebody has to. Like it's the rules. But I saw them together on Slayer's farewell tour, and both of them were fucking fantastic.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, I bet.
Nice.
The pit that was going for like Angel of Death and a couple of the other songs that Slayer did, like War Ensemble and shit like that, was like 80% of the crowd.
Yeah. Oh
Like,
yeah.
like normally
That
you'll have
sounds
like you'll have like a
amazing.
couple of pockets here and there, but like this was like the entire crowd was going. It was
Oh yeah.
awesome.
Oh, I wish I could have witnessed that.
Like
One
that,
of my
that was such a great experience, and they did it all over the world. I think they Slayer toured the world twice on their farewell tour.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, I think Kiss is still on their worldwide farewell tour.
Yeah, we'll believe that when they see it. This has been like their third farewell tour.
Yeah, they probably do that as marketing to get ticket sales.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And yeah, definitely Soul Assassin is like, you're welcome in the pit, but know what you're getting into because you're about to enter a new world.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Very
Oh, yeah.
likely death. Or is that just the wall of death?
I was gonna say
the Wall of Death is always a fun experience, especially because there's always one or two people at the show that have never been in one before and don't know what's going on until it's too late.
essentially you'll have the whole mosh pit in the middle, right? And then when like the singer or someone in the band says we're going to start a wall of death, what they'll do is they'll part like the Red Sea and form two lions, and then when the music starts they just run and start slamming into each other, hence wall of death.
Yeah, and there's always a couple of poor unfortunate people in the middle that didn't quite get the memo or don't really know what's going on.
Right.
And they get
stuck
it
in the
from
middle and
both
don't-
sides.
Yeah, just get slammed into.
Well, hopefully no concussions result in it.
I mean, usually not. People are usually pretty good about it, but like I'm always really mindful when I'm in the pit of like people who are like especially on the smaller side.
Yeah.
Because you got like big bruisers like me in there who are in there banging each other around, and then these guys can easily just get run over.
Yeah, I am one of those smaller people, so
Yeah,
it's probably why I've never actually been into the pit.
yeah. I mean, it's a fun experience, but like it's not for everyone.
True.
And like and that's the cool part is there's no real right way to do a metal show. If you want to be just in the back, just kind of hanging out and banging your head and whatever, that's fine. And if you want to be up front with the animals in the pit, like like the rest of us, that's perfectly.
Oh yeah.
And it's. I mean, I'm getting to the age too where it's just like the pit hurts a little more than it used to.
But also far enough away that you won't get hit by Rammstein's fireworks.
Yeah, having witnessed that show firsthand, you want to be a little back from the stage because even like midway through the crowd, you could still feel the heat coming off of the pyro.
Yeah.
It was
Oh, yeah.
glorious.
For anyone who doesn't know, Rammstein is a pyromaniac.
Oh yeah, they all are, and like they'll there's I think during the song Mind Tile, like the lead singer has a freaking flamethrower and is torching the keyboardist who's in a giant pot.
That's fucking awesome.
Well, the song's about cannibalism, so one of the reasons Rammstein is a unique act. Although these guys remind me a lot of them in terms of their tone and their
Definitely their
musical style.
and also their aesthetic.
Oh yeah,
You find it a lot. You find this kind of style a lot with goth bands.
Oh,
Doesn't
yeah.
matter what goth band it is, you will find this type of look.
And of course, praise be Lord Thoth.
Praise be.
The most unique of the Egyptian gods.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
But no, that's the thing Soul Assassin said. Like pretty much like goth and metal shows, and even rock shows. Like the crowd is just cool as hell most of the time. Like as long as like you're just kind of doing your thing and nobody's acting like a dick, everybody's chill.
Yeah.
And we're just all kind of because it really is like a sense of community a lot in that we're all there to do the same thing.
Brotherhood, actually, a sense of brotherhood in metalhead.
Yeah, and that we're all there for the same purpose. We're all part of this big, like you say, brotherhood's a perfect word for it.
You're welcome.
It really is. Yeah.
And it's really a special kind of thing. And it's cool because this is a side of the scene I don't know a lot about. I don't know many goths in personal life, so I don't really get to interact with them a lot, and we don't tend to go to the same. Yeah, exactly. So and if this is an indication of what most of the goth scene is about, I can't say it's like my new obsession, but I could certainly see myself just like kind of putting on one of these albums when I'm just kind of doing some writing or stuff like that, because it's got kind of that. I don't want to say simplified because it's not. It actually does have some pretty cool musical elements to it, but it's just it's not really like it's not like an insane like thrash or heavy metal track where you have all sorts of speed changes and stuff like that. Like it's fairly straightforward and just kind of rhythmic, and there's a cool kind of soothing atmosphere around a lot of it, which is I think where the symphonic side of this band comes in.
Yeah. They also have a little bit of an electronic side. Their lead vocals does a lot of the programming.
Okay.
That's a thing in a lot of these bands. Like Joaquin from Sabaton's also their keyboardist, even though he's their singer. Because according to him, basically, the band needed a singer to record a demo, and then so they asked him to do it, and then they just never found a singer. So he just got kind of stuck doing it.
But he does a great job with Sabaton.
He does.
I mean, I haven't heard their older stuff, but the new stuff that we went over with our Sabaton episode, I was just like, I was blown away. I was like, wow, dude, this guy's got some power behind his voice.
Oh yeah, and this guy's he doesn't use a lot of that power, but you can hear it in that low end.
Yeah,
where he's got that booming that deep booming baritone.
He definitely got a very good bass in his throat. If you hear that song I suggested before we started, Dark Side, you can really hear him hit those low notes, and it's like, whoa, I can't even hit those notes, and I am I can hit low notes.
I mean, a baritone, like a really deep baritone, is actually kind of rare in a rock or metal singer. Because
you'll find that in some goth metal, also in Lord of the Lost. Their lead singer also has that type of bass.
Yeah. But like, it's really hard to actually project that and put like real power behind your voice that deep in your register. Like it can get drowned out by the percussion in the bass section. But it's really cool to see when a band pulls it off right.
Yeah,
and these guys do a really good job of it.
Absolutely, they do. It's part of why they're so good.
Yeah, and like it's really good. I mean, it goes to show you too, like this is not like, the extremely technical freaking death metal or like, like a lot more of like the trad heavy metal stuff where it's all about like screaming guitars and just fast paced fist pumping action all the time. Like these guys kind of throttle back. It's kind of a mid tempo and just kind of go really heavy with it.
Yeah.
And then the other album I've wanted to talk, I think I have no. This was the last one I listened to from them, and this one was a really solid one.
This is the one that has the song "Dark Side."
Yep, this one was really, really good.
My very first GOTHMINISTER song, and I just fell in love because it's so good.
This album was really good, and the old school music nerd in me was really glad to hear that cover of Thriller at the end of this one.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I'd say, Thriller.
Of course.
This is going to be like one of my favorites out of the ones I've listened to so far. I love the sound on it. It's great. But yeah.
Yeah, this one was, I think this was 2012, 2013, something like that?
2012.
I think maybe even earlier than that. But I definitely say that this one has a bit more of the grunge elements.
Yeah, a little bit. I can hear that.
A little bit.
I think that's a product of, being around in the late 90s and, being influenced by that scene coming in. Because you hear a lot of that in a lot of the late 90s and early 2000s metalcore and kind of more punkish bands, in that they kind of adopted that more I don't want to say melancholy aspect, but it kind of is into their, especially lyricism, but which like you get two schools of thought on it, and neither one of them's wrong. Where the really extreme guys like the death and black metal scene are like, this is just like, whatever, this is kind of mainstream and they don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
And then you also have guys where they're like, where the musicianship's not really there, at least for them. So like, it's not super technical, it's not super off the wall and stuff like that. So it kind of falls in this weird little no man's land. And I think that's why it's a cool niche, because these are bands that may not get a whole lot of spotlight, and that's one of the reasons I like doing the show, is we get to take bands that we like and let people know about them. So if it sounds like something you guys want to see or want to listen to, then congratulations, we just got you into new bands. Like how many bands have you gotten into because we did an episode on them?
Oh man, it's been almost every single episode at this point.
The last episode, you had not heard a lot of Motorhead.
Yeah,
wait,
that's true.
Seriously?
Yeah.
there's been a few songs off of like Ace of Spades that I've heard on the radio or just have heard around friends, but I've never like really listened to Motorhead. And yeah, that episode I was like, this is fucking good. I'm gonna be jamming these guys a lot more. Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And that's their classic trilogy too. I mean, Overkill,
yeah.
Bomber, and Ace of Spades. Like that's as good as Motorhead or OG Motorhead gets.
Yeah. Well, because for me, and I've told Pope this before, but I really came into like the traditional heavy metal through the thrash side, like listening to like Anthrax, Exodus, old Metallica, stuff like that. And then from then in high school, I started getting into like really heavy shit, like technical death metal, brutal death metal, all the stuff that people would normally listen to and be like, I don't like these vocals, I'm out. That's the kind of shit that I listen to, is just really, really heavy shit. But
Yeah, I definitely love the growling stuff.
it's yeah, there's been quite a few of like the older classics that I've kind of missed out on. That and like I grew up with religious parents always playing like Christian music and gospel music, so I really kind of missed out on listening to some of the classics. Like most of the classics I got was like freaking Johnny Cash, like more on the countryside, stuff like that. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, at least you didn't grow
that's for
up with
me.
Jewish music.
Oh.
Jewish music sucks.
Oh no.
That's why I'm so late into the metal game, okay?
YouTube, she said that, not me. Please don't believe.
I speak the truth!
She's allowed to. She has a pass.
Oh.
But no,
Yeah, I actually got
came
into-
into it through for more of a classic rock background. Like my dad was big into like, Led Zeppelin, Boston, all that kind of stuff. So I kind of came into that through that era, and then get into the rock and blues stuff really got me into like trad heavy stuff like Black Sabbath, all that kind of stuff, and Motorhead.
Oh yeah.
And it's easy to see how that style evolved into punk and the trad heavy stuff into what we see in the 90s, which a lot of people were starting to play around with synths and stuff like that in the 80s. And you kind of see that evolve into actual techno and stuff like that in the early 90s. And then you see bands like Rammstein start adopting that into what we call industrial metal now in the late 90s. And I'm not surprised that's when these guys formed, because it sounds like that era to me.
Yeah.
There's a ton of bands coming out that all were kind of playing around with this sound.
Yeah. Especially, like I said, the goth bands. Industrial music is a very big part of goth subculture these days, especially on the music side. And I'm not going to lie, we literally have our own dance to it. Ever heard of the industrial dance?
No, I don't think I have, actually.
I don't think
look it up. It's literally it's mostly our movements. You'll see most of people with the cyber goth dreadlocks doing it.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I've done it. It's fun as hell.
They usually are.
Oh yes.
But no, I mean, like that's the really cool side of this genre of music, is there's so many different places to start, and people are all at different places, and like this is how a lot of the underground bands started out, was just trading tapes back and forth in the 80s and 90s.
Oh yeah,
And
a lot of the goth bands are definitely more obscure. Like there are some goth YouTubers I follow who have whole lists on some of their videos and websites, just listing endless lists of goth bands that I've never even heard of before, because they're so obscure, because they're so in this little niche of the gothic culture.
Oh yeah, I mean there's all sorts of different little niches, like in the power metal scene and stuff like that. And it's all like different styles, but it's all comes from the same tradition and the same attitude, basically. So it's all like the goths and the metalheads, and to a lesser extent the punks, can all kind of just get along and like bring different experiences into the genre as a whole.
Oh yes,
which I think is really cool, because like this more standardized stuff gets really boring to me. Like so like Spanish hip hop I cannot stand, because it all uses that same drum beat.
Oh yeah,
and it's just like, no,
pop
I don't want
music
to hear
in general
this.
sucks.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks. Pop sucks.
Pretty much, especially after the 80s. Like a lot of like the 80s synth pop stuff I can kind of get along with, and like I don't hate it. Like especially like Michael Jackson or
well, you can't really fault Michael Jackson.
Well, no, I mean he's just a musical
genius.
Like Michael Jackson, Prince, that kind of stuff I really dig, because it's actually musically very talented.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
even some of the more modern stuff like Bruno Mars, I actually don't mind because it's not really pop; it's 70s funk.
Yeah. He does kind of fall into the like mainstream pop genre just because
Yeah,
of the whole being signed by major labels, playing huge
Yep.
shows and tours. But
I do
yeah,
think
he's
he
more kind of along the lines of funk music.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I do think he uses falsetto a bit too much.
Yeah, but
Mm,
there's a lot of singers who do that. Looking at you, Adam Lambert.
I actually
yep.
liked Adam Lambert when he was on American Idol.
I think I have a little bit more animosity towards him now because he's fronting the remainder of Queen,
Yeah.
and that's no.
What really introduced me to metal, though, besides my metalhead grandpa, was James Durbin in season 10 of American Idol. He sang a bunch of metal songs in his run. So,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's actually a surprising thing with a lot of those kind of talent shows and stuff like that is people are actually really amazed at the level of, especially singing talent, that
because
you'll find in the genre.
James Durbin literally trained his voice to hit the Angel of Death scream from Slayer.
Nice.
And that kind of thing. You listen to some of his singing, and that's pure vocals. No falsetto, no machine.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
like that's the same as like,
I was very impressed by it back then.
yeah, and like there are guys who can just have that kind of range. Like Rob Halford from Judas Priest is one of them, where he has like a 5.5 octave range.
James Durbin did get to perform with Judas Priest in that season finale.
Nice. Yep. So and like that's absolutely like the area for that kind of voice is. Whereas I don't think it would sound as good on something like this, where it's a little more down tuned and a little more
a little more grungy.
Yeah, a little grungier and stuff like that, where like a real, high pitched vocal I don't think would work with this.
Definitely not. It's different. It's an entirely different subgenre.
Yeah, agreed 100%. This is the kind of music where you would want lower, more not raspy, but more like growly type vocals, which the singer has a bit of with GOTHMINISTER, but I mean for the most part he's got this like there's some growls, there's some like sort of like I wouldn't say like screaming, but it's almost on that line of like screaming type vocals, but he's got that growl to him.
Yeah,
it just works better with a lower range.
And he has too, and Rammstein does this a lot, is that rolling kind of Germanic R sound.
Oh yeah.
That they kind of,
that's got to be the Norwegian
which is really
blood.
cool. Yep. And like it adds a really cool element into a lot of these bands, because you don't hear it a lot from like American or English acts, because that's not really a sound that we do in our speech.
The cooler stuff always tends to come from Europe.
Yeah, and I even like it when they sing in their native languages. Like we were saying that on the Sabaton episode, Herbs, where they did Carolus Rex in Swedish as well as English.
Right.
Oh, that sounds so cool.
Oh, it was, and like every time I see them live, they actually ask if we want to hear one of their songs in Swedish, or in Swedish or English off that album, and almost every time the crowd will go with Swedish.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because one of their songs off that record actually has different lyrics. It's sung in Swedish rather than English.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and it's got to be interesting too to have a song that can have two different meanings depending on what language it's in and sound good in both languages.
That's impressive. That is impressive indeed.
It is. It's really cool. And yeah, those Viking rowing mosh pits, like you'll see at Amon Amarth, are freaking awesome. I've been part of a couple of them.
Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, and these guys, like, I could easily see them, touring with some bigger bands because they have that sound.
Definitely.
Maybe
I could totally see them on a stage with Rammstein.
Oh yeah, I mean, maybe not as a headline act, but like as an opener, I could see them definitely as a great warm up for a band like them. Maybe even 9 Inch Nails or somebody like that if they start touring again, because I think they're back together.
Oh, are they really?
I haven't, or at the very least, Trent Reznor's doing a lot of shit.
Okay,
but that's because he usually is.
Yeah.
But no, I mean it's I could easily see these guys touring with some really big bands, and that would be really good for them. Because I mean, like you say, they started in '99, so they're kind of like.
Yeah, they started in '99. I think it was just the lead singer doing industrial techno stuff.
Yep.
Then I think, from what I can remember and understand, he later got more members and they started doing actual music, which didn't really release until 2002, 2003.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
usually the pattern of that. Is like it takes them like probably 3-4 years to not only get signed to a label but have enough material written that they can
Yeah.
put on an album. And then, it's off to the races from there with, the typical rock band touring schedule of just album tour always.
Oh,
Yeah,
I was right.
yeah.
I'm on their wiki right now. When they have performed in Mera Luna Festival.
Nice.
Oh, okay. Very
I
cool.
knew it. They are so
Very
the type
cool.
too.
And
I wanna go to
dude,
Mera
I'd love to talk to comics about these guys, because I'm into the industrial scene a little bit, and I know he's a big like Rob Zombie fan and stuff like that, and that was all really popular when I was a kid. So
Rob Zombie is
like
still
I grew
good.
up with it.
I'm actually looking
So
forward
good,
to his
yeah.
Monstrous movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, same.
like his Pigface. I don't think I've ever heard, actually.
Sounds familiar though.
Like if I heard one of their songs, I've probably heard it, because God knows I play enough of this stuff where I'm literally just listening to it all the time, but I don't know them by sight. But speaking of by sight, we have a picture here of the band members, which you get a real feel for that aesthetic, which
Yeah,
it's kind of
you
that
can
really
go on. You can go on to Wikipedia to find their actual names. These
Yeah,
are
I always like going with their stage names though, because that's like
stage names
how
are
they want
always
to put,
cooler.
like and that's how they want to be put out to the world. So that's
True.
like that was one of the things I always thought was pretty cool with Ghost, is that only Tobias is actually a solid member of the band.
Yeah, everyone else is a nameless ghoul. I've seen that before.
Yeah, and I'm a huge Ghost fan. I love that aesthetic. And
they look so hardcore, but then his vocals are so.
Well, and it fits their style really well, where it's more like the old school 70s and 80s style, rock and metal sound, which I really dig. I've seen them live, and the stage show is freaking awesome.
Nice.
They have like this whole like cathedral backdrop, and like it's just a really cool thing. I will say I like their older masks a lot better, the silver ones. The newer black ones, it kind of looks like they're wearing a gas mask, so it's less unique.
The silver ones where they actually look like ghouls, those definitely were better.
And Ghost is definitely a band I think is kind of a collision between the metalheads and goths in a lot of ways. I know a lot of goths who are into Ghost.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I love the way they describe, or people describe the band too, where it's like they're either a satanic cult disguised as a rock band, or a rock band disguised as a satanic cult, and then no one remembers which.
Why not both?
Exactly. Why not both?
I mean, we're metalheads. We get accused of Satanism all the time.
Pretty much. Well,
that's kind of where the whole. So do goths. So
well,
I get a double.
That's kind of where the whole black metal scene came from. Was the Satanic Panic in the 70s, and like the early bands were like kind of really defensive about it, and like oh no, we don't worship the devil. It's just like an aesthetic. And then you had Venom coming out in '81 with Welcome to Hell with a pentagram. Yes,
with the pentagram. Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't know if you heard of Behemoth's lead singer winning that court case in Poland, proving that his band is not satanic.
I hadn't heard that he won. I knew that he was.
Well, he won the case. He won the case.
Interesting. Very cool.
That's right, people. Behemoth, despite their crazy music videos, are not actually satanic.
Excellent.
Why would that even be a thing in like Poland of all places too? I mean,
well, Poland's pretty defensive of their culture.
Do they have a state religion in Poland, or
not that I recall?
I believe they're I don't know that it's an official state religion. I think they're mostly either Orthodox or Catholic.
I think Orthodox, or at least that's what I remember.
And I think it's partly depends where you're from in Poland, because I think the more Germanic side is mostly more on the Catholic tradition, like the Holy Roman Empire was. And then towards the east, towards Russia, you have Eastern Orthodox, a big Orthodox Church influence. And I think that's a lot stronger in Eastern Europe, because they weren't allowed to openly worship for a long time under the Soviet Union. So I think I think that's why you see this explosion of German and like Eastern European bands in the 90s.
Yeah, there's also a new Russian metal band called Slaughter to Prevail.
Yep, there's some.
I've heard of them. Yeah,
there's some really good Russian bands.
Yeah.
That have come
Arcona
out.
is also a very good one.
Yep.
But yeah, actually, finding out about him winning that lawsuit is what got me into Behemoth a few weeks ago.
Nice. Behemoth's really good for a second. They're a second wave black metal artist that I've always really enjoyed. I never got to see them live. They did play around here not too long ago. I wanted to go, but I was busy that day.
I heard they're currently touring live with Arch Enemy.
That would be
very cool. Very cool.
I'm weird.
Alyssa White Glass does have some pretty insane vocals.
That's the thing, is she's a good singer. She's a complete train wreck of a human being.
Yeah, and unfortunately also an activist with blue hair.
Oh yeah, she fits the SJW stereotype like to a T.
I know, which is such a contradiction because her aesthetic and her music are freaking awesome.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
I mean, I disagree with a lot of the stuff a lot of the punk bands say, but I like their aesthetic and I like their music. So
yeah.
And also, punk has changed a lot in recent years. Like, it used to be very anarchist and very libertarian, and basically screw you, I do what I want, leave me alone.
Yeah, that's kind of what goth is too.
And now it's kind of become the far left has taken over punk in a lot of ways, and that's not great. But
goth unfortunately has elitists too. Like,
yeah,
I had someone once say that I wasn't actually a goth. I was alternative because I don't listen to the classic goth bands. I pretty much told her to F off.
Yeah, that's usually the response. And and every group has that, core group of bands that kind of identify that group, and people will kind of be taken aback if you haven't heard them, but that just means you're just like, oh no, you got to listen to him. Here's how you start. Like, that's how you be an actual fan, not an elitist douche.
Yeah.
And every genre has those people. The black metal elitists are prevalent in a lot of those circles too. Where if you don't dress like they do, or even like me, where when I go to a show, I'm usually wearing a band T-shirt and maybe a leather jacket and jeans.
Isn't that what all metalheads wear?
Yeah, I mean, that's like pretty bog standard, but it's like, oh no, you don't have the freaking spikes and all that. I'm like, yeah, because I want to get through the metal detector.
Makes sense to me.
It's like, and I was really mad when they started banning bullet belts at freaking shows. It's just like, really? They're fake.
Yeah.
Wow, I have not heard that before.
A lot of venues are getting bad with it.
Oh my god. But they're attached to the belt. It's not like you're going to put them in a gun.
Yeah, and not to mention, most of them are plastic, or at the very least, just hollow metal. It's like
hollowed
out. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I was around the whole because there were, I don't know when exactly it was, but there was a time where fights were getting worse. People were bringing weapons and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So they were trying to ban weapons, and bullet belts just happened to be considered a weapon. Because they were bullets.
You could use them like that, but
a spiked belt is more of a weapon than a bullet belt.
Yeah.
Have you seen the marks those things leave?
Oh yeah, I mean, you see those some of the ones you'd see at black metal shows, those spikes are like that long.
Yeah.
It's like getting hit with a football cleat.
Yeah.
Worse. Yeah. It's more spiked.
But no, it's insane that how far a lot of things are going. But you're ever going to really fully stop it. I mean, metalheads have been sneaking beer and drugs into shows for as long as there's been metal bands. So
yep.
Yeah, that's very true.
Life finds a way,
as they say.
But
metal.
Indeed. And that's one of the greatest things too. If you're trying to tell metalheads what not to do, well, congratulations, you just guaranteed that's the first thing we're going to do.
Yeah, pretty much.
But no, I mean, that's the cool thing about this scene too, is a lot of other scenes, music scenes, you have kind of a standard. Well, you have a bunch of people who don't really know what's going on, whereas a lot of the metal genres, the people who are there is the people who really want to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
Oh yeah, definitely.
It's not a lot of the country or shows like that where that guy's there, people are there because they were they either got tickets or they thought it would be fun. They're not like actually really into the scene. I don't know if the country scene has what we would think of as posers, because it's just kind of a normie genre, really. Like it's really kind of the mainstream, especially nowadays. Jesus, like you can't find a good rock station anymore anywhere. But there's like
too many commercials and too many talk shows.
And there's like 4 country stations at least around Boston.
Oh, it's same where I'm at too. It's like mostly country stations.
My hometown's rock station, morning talk show, afternoon 3-hour talk show when I just wanted to listen to freaking metal, and then of course they played the football game on Sundays.
Of course, yeah. Like one of the rock stations around me, AAF, actually changed their programming format. I think they got bought by a different company, and they went from doing metal to gospel. So imagine being that guy that didn't get that memo.
Wow.
Gospel
that
music?
Must suck.
Oh,
and it's
quite a 180.
Yeah, imagine not getting that memo. You're expecting to hear like, Judas Priest, Metallica, whatever, and then you hear this stuff. It's like,
the fuck is going on
here? Wrong with my radio? I think we only really have one classic rock station left in Boston, and like the funny part is like nowadays you'll start hearing music from like when we were kids on there. Like I heard the Foo Fighters on there on the other day. I'm like, no.
Oh man.
I'm not old enough to have the music on the classic rock station yet.
Wow. Yeah, I thought they were still considered alternative. What's going on, man?
My hometown would also just have a radio station that literally has the motto of playing what we want. And it was usually just a bunch of 70s and 80s music.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Well, you can't go wrong with that. That was like the high point of rock and metal.
Yeah.
It was like the late 70s and the early 80s. And Opie and Anthony are not on anymore. First of all, BCN's a top 40 station now. And Opie and Anthony got fired.
Oh, no.
They got fired for basically perpetuating a hoax that the mayor of Boston died. And,
the mayor? Oh, no.
And, yeah, people were not amused. That happened in like the early 2000s, I think.
That's funny thinking about it, but at the same time, I can see why people would get pissed off at that.
Oh yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. But I mean, that was part of the shock jock era of like the 90s. You had like Howard Stern, Opie and Anthony, like just doing whatever they could get away with.
Yeah.
Which is really ironic when you consider that Stern's the only one left, and he basically sold out.
Yeah, Stern's turned into a little bit of a bitch.
Yeah.
That's a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, and the worst one to me was Dee Snider, because it's like, you have, the guys who were super anti-authority and, we're not going to do what you tell us in the 80s with like Twisted Sister. And now he's out there talking about freaking all this shit during COVID and stuff like that. It's just like, dude, what the fuck happened to you?
Yeah, Disturbed's lead man, David Draymond, who was actually originally a Hasidic Jew.
Yeah, he was.
Is now condemning critics of live action Ariel.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
you really like Hollywood get to you. The whole reason you left the Hasidic Jewish scene was because it was too strict for you.
And you look at
him and you could not tell that he's Hasidic. At all.
Yeah, you would not know that by looking at him. No. But I actually saw Disturbed a couple of years ago when they came through Boston, and I did think he had a really good outlook on it as far as the music goes. Is basically, and this is in 2019, so this was fairly late in the Trump derangement era. And he was basically like, hey, I don't give a fuck who you voted for. I don't give a fuck what you believe in. Tonight, we are all brothers and sisters in metal. So let's do this fucking thing and treat each other well. It's like,
yeah, what happened to that?
Yeah. And like that used to be the metal anthem or the metal credo. Is just like, hey, we're here to freaking
be ourselves and do whatever we want.
Yeah. We're here to get away from all that like real world bullshit.
It's kind of what goth is too. It's kind of also what the goth subculture is, as a subculture of self-expression.
Exactly.
Beauty and darkness and all that.
And even like, for like the mainstream rock and metal fans, it's like, we're here to have a good time, drink some beers and throw each other around a little bit. And like, we're just here to have a good time. And when you start bringing, political views or shit like that into it, it really kind of ruins the fun.
It really does, yeah.
And like I think that's where bands like U2 went wrong, where like early on they were actually not bad, and then they got really activistic, and everyone just kind of turned off.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Get woke, go broke.
Yep. Hey, Lavitz, how's it going, man? All the way from Australia.
Ooh.
Hey.
Yeah,
Good day, mate.
Yeah, Frank, and I used to really like Dee Snider's attitudes, even if I wasn't the biggest Twisted Sister fan. And now he's just like watching him and Razor go at it on freaking Twitter is hilarious. Because Razor is an old school metalhead, just like me, and we're both like, "What the fuck happened to you?" Like I remember, I think a couple years ago, I posted back at him his speech from the PMRC. It's just like, remember when you actually used to, believe in this shit, and weren't speaking against and weren't speaking actively against like people speaking their minds and doing what they want, not being forced to do anything.
Right.
Like, oh man, it's so sad to see your icons like go down like that.
It really does.
Like I heard Ozzy running his mouth about some stuff recently, and it's just like,
yeah,
dude.
he and Sharon like decided to leave America because it's going so much to hell.
Yeah, and it's just like, dude, you haven't been back to the UK recently, apparently, because it's just as bad over there. At least in London. And if he goes back to Birmingham, I think he's going to be really surprised at the change in demographics and culture of the area. In that, I think it's mostly a Pakistani enclave now, where it used to be all like working class British guys. Like most of the guys in the first wave metal bands all worked for some of the steel foundries and shit like that.
Yeah.
Well, maybe that's where metal comes from.
Well, it kind of is, like, especially when you look at
just talking about the title metal.
Well, yeah, but I think that came from a Steppenwolf song that somebody from Rolling Stone magazine kind of ran with as a name for this new genre that was mostly Sabbath, and then Priest came out and kind of took that mantle as like the first self-identified metal band.
Cool.
And that kind of went from there. And I think half the guys in those bands used to work for British Steel. Like Tony Iommi, that's actually how how the drop D sound got invented, because he lost the tips of two of his fingers. Yeah. In his last day at work at British Steel in a sheet metal press.
Oof.
And he had to have prosthetics that he put on the tips of his fingers so he could still play, but he had to detune his guitar slightly so he could still bend properly. And
rough break.
But it ended up creating that deep, dark sound that Black Sabbath invented, and kind of got the whole thing started with the first two albums, and everyone was just like, "Who the hell are these guys?" And they just started playing these deep, really sexy blues riffs, and just Tony Iommi is just a riff master in general. But you kind of can see it in like some of the, especially in British Steel by Judas Priest, like some of that like pounding bass line behind it is kind of that driving force, and that kind of brings it into the industrial side, because you kind of have that industrial pounding rhythm behind. A lot of Rammstein, GOTHMINISTER, a lot of this kind of stuff.
Yeah, like steampunk is an entire subgenre of the gothic subculture.
Yeah.
You see them in like festivals all the time. If you look at someone, there's literally we have a whole faction just for steampunk lovers. So they can have their aesthetic whenever they like.
Yeah. And like that's really a lot of the differences people are talking about. Like it's not so much the musical differences, although there are some, both in lyrical content and kind of ethos a little bit between the different subgenres, but a lot of it is just aesthetic. And like I think this picture demonstrates it really well. Of like it's not spikes and leather and all that kind of stuff.
Nah,
but
it
is identifiable as metal.
As goth. It's the more subtle aspect, kind of like what I do, which I kind of have to do because I'm Jewish and I follow all the modesty rules. I have to keep my looks subtle.
Yep.
Purim and Halloween is when I really go all out. But anyway, yeah.
You have to.
Yeah. I mean, it's Halloween!
Yeah, it's like if you're a goth and you're not going wild on Halloween,
I
what
mean,
are you
I
even doing?
can't. I mean, I'm Jewish, and Halloween is a pagan holiday. Therefore, I can't actually celebrate it.
Fair.
So I celebrate October instead.
Exactly. It's a harvest festival, right?
Yeah, but but Purim, you can just call it the Jewish Halloween.
Yeah. Most cultures have like that that kind of Halloween or that kind of spiritual holiday kind of communing with the dead a little bit.
We don't actually have that one unless you count Rosh Hashanah,
Fair.
the day of judgment.
Okay, fair.
But yeah, Purim is our is what we call is technically the topsy-turvy day, which is why everyone's dressed up in costume. And that's another day when I get to go all out, kind of like how their aesthetic is.
Well, yeah, it's kind of cool too, because especially in the more regimented sides of religions, usually you'll see like that one day where they are allowed to break the rules, they go really nuts.
Oh yeah, Purim is actually a religious law to get drunk on Purim.
Yeah, I was gonna say I hear there's a lot of drinking during Purim, and I can get behind that.
It's literally a religious law to the point the law is you have to get so enamored to the point where you cannot remember the difference between Mordechai and Haman. You can't remember the difference between the good guy and the bad guy.
Basically, blackout drunk, as
pretty much.
Say. Yeah,
you literally it is. I'm not kidding. It's a religious law. Hey, if anyone wants to convert to Judaism and drink religiously,
fair.
Yeah.
Although, I mean, I'm
Irish,
so that's just a cultural thing with us.
Well, good for you. You drink us all under the table.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, that and being a Marine, yeah, we drink a lot.
Then again, you also eat crayons.
Yeah, this is very true. But no, I mean, especially like you see it in like some of the stricter Catholic countries, like in South America and Europe, where they have their carnival, and they just go absolutely crazy. Like, you know, you see like the footage from like the carnival in Rio. It's just like, holy shit.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's a little less. I mean, it's a little less common in the metal community because, you know, a lot of the Judeo-Christian faiths that we are kind of persona non grata a little bit. So it kind of goes, we kind of travel back to that kind of more tribal pagan religions. Like you'll see a lot of like, you know, pagan imagery, like, you know, pentagrams, the Wicker Man, that kind of stuff, where that was a crazy tradition in Britain. Where, the Wicker Man is a thing.
Originally
that used to happen
because a lot of pagan traditions kind of got adopted into Christianity, unfortunately.
Well, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the Wicker Man is a thing.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, that happened right up until the Christians came back to Britain after the Dark Ages and were like, okay, what the hell are you people doing? No more of that.
Do you mean before or after the Black Plague?
This was before. This was probably about the 800s or 900s when that's kind of stopped. Because, I mean, before they were kind of willing to let like the pagan Britons do their own thing over in Wales and places like that. But then once the Viking invasion happened, they started getting really touchy about pagans.
Good point.
It was the Viking.
That was when they really started amping up their navy.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had to. Yeah.
And and that's kind of where you come into the, you know, where some of the style for the goth movement comes in is the Gothic era. Is like you see very kind of understated,
romantic Victorian era.
Yeah, you see it in a lot of their album art, especially where you'll have like kind of a more subdued but very you know, the best way to describe it is Gothic, but like that like kind of more cathedral art style. You'll see in a lot of it, like that kind of like rundown, kind of grayed out cathedral is a really cool thing you'll see on a lot of both goth and black metal albums.
That is true. The Gothic architecture is unrivaled,
and it's a really cool aesthetic. Especially me being a Warhammer 40k nerd, like shit, we build spaceships that are Gothic. Okay,
now I want to play Warhammer. You have me on Gothic spaceships.
Oh, it's hysterical! Like some of their battleships and stuff, like it have like, complete with stained glass windows and everything.
That's so cool!
It's freaking awesome.
If only my computer could handle it.
I mean, there's a lot of older 40K games that will run on pretty much anything.
Just my computer is not meant for games.
Oh,
I
okay.
have to get a new one if I want to play more games on it. That's all.
But yeah, like I got into the game to the universe through Space Marine, which is a fantastic game. I actually did a playthrough of it on the channel early on before I came up with this idea. So now I do all that stuff on Twitch whenever I remember I have a Twitch, which is almost never these days. But no, it's a really cool art style, and it's glad to see somebody kind of keeping it alive in pop culture a little bit. And that's one of the reasons I do this kind of channel is to keep talking about bands like these guys, or like the older, or just the more underground stuff. Because when I came in, like everybody was talking about like pop culture, comic books, movies, that kind of stuff, and I didn't really hear of that, like other than like 70s rock fan and Nick Weiser. Like there wasn't a whole lot of people talking about metal and rock. So I was just
or music in general, really.
Yeah, and that's an important part of culture that everyone has feelings on, be it positive or negative. And I think it's an important part of culture that I think kind of gets ignored some.
It definitely does.
So I'm really glad to be kind of part of this side of it, and kind of trying to bring attention to some of these bands, especially like you say, underground bands like this, that unless you're part of the goth scene, you probably haven't heard much of them. Because
I seriously recommend these guys. I seriously recommend these guys. They're very good.
And as we all know, if as metalheads, the really good stuff is the stuff you never hear on the radio.
That is definitely true.
At least not in the US. Apparently in Europe, they'll have like heavy metal stations that they are just.
Well, that's because most of the metal bands are from Europe.
Oh, yeah,
they're
true.
literally their culture.
True. And it's funny how it kind of got adopted by the Scandinavians, because like it started in England. And in the 70s, and then in the 80s, the Scandinavians kind of got a hold of it with some of the black metal stuff, and then they just ran with it.
They perfected it, I say.
Yeah, and especially for like death and black metal, they are now the home of those genres. Like my one of my friends was was part of a black metal band around here called Ash and Wings. And then they never, like almost nobody around here knew him other than people like me who actually know the band. And then he moved to Finland for work, and somebody actually recognized him in the crowd at a show. They were like, "Yeah, you're so-and-so, right?" I'm like, he's like, "Yeah, how do you know that?" No one knows who I am.
That sounds awesome.
But no, it's kind of funny that you never know, like especially in the internet age, you never know where this stuff is going to end up, and where you're going to make it big. Like, and especially we were talking before about like some of the bands coming in from across the globe, and you never would have heard these bands 20 years ago. They would have just been like this little garage band or something in wherever they came from. And like outside their local scene, they would never like really made it to that level. Like there's a lot of Japanese bands from the 80s that absolutely kick ass.
Samurai metal is a thing now.
And even like some of their traditional heavy metal bands like Loudness or Anthem are fucking great. And like the Japanese, when they get into something, they get really into it. And,
I know. Thank God for Japan.
Yeah, they've kind of kept a lot of Western culture alive through.
Oh, yes, they have, which is why I say thank God for Japan. Everyone hail Japan.
Yeah, there's a real heavy scene, especially in this kind of stuff, with like a lot more of the electronic side of metal as well. They mix that in with a lot of it, like bands like High and Mighty Color and stuff like that. They're really good. And we'll probably do an episode on some of the Japanese bands I listen to at some point, because that's a side of the scene that it's hard to get a hold of some of their music in the States, because it's all distribution rights and stuff like that, and some of it's out of print and shit like that.
Oh yeah, but that would be a really fun show.
Yeah, I mean, actually no, yeah, I mean we'll probably do that. Shit, probably next week. I don't have a plan for another plan for next week's show yet.
Next week it starts Rosh Hashanah, so I can't do it.
Oh yeah,
so.
But no, it's a really great thing, and you get that influx of fresh sounds and instrumentation from other parts of the world that incorporate itself into the genre really well. And it's a really cool way to keep it fresh and keep it interesting and do what pop punk failed to do in the 90s and not have every band sound the fucking same.
Yeah, that's why I hate pop. It all sounds the same.
It's all the same soulless trash.
Yeah.
So you can tell there's absolutely no emotion behind it whatsoever.
It's why I love metal, because it talks about things that actually matter.
And you can
speaks to the soul.
And you can tell that, you know, these guys are doing what they want to do. Like a lot of bands early on, and I think like you heard a couple early songs from these guys that sound a little more on the poppy side, but I think that's probably the label. Basically kind of exerting a little influence to try to get a couple mainstream hits out of them. A lot of bands have that happen to them earlier in their career, especially if they're kind of in a niche genre like goth, where they don't know how much they're going to really make off of these guys. So they want to kind of hedge their bets a little bit. Disturbed had that happen early in their career, where if you notice, like their first two albums sound very, very different from the ones that came later. And I think that was why that happened. I got to go for 1 second. Just vamp for me. I'll be right back.
Sure. And now I can say this actually on stream because he just popped out. Before you came in, Sergeant Herbs, I actually told Pope Metallicus that my grandpa got to meet Megadeth.
Okay, very cool. Very cool.
And I am the only grandchild of his 20-plus grandchildren to inherit the metalhead.
Nice, yeah.
And I didn't get to, and my cousin, who's not a metalhead and had no idea what they were, ended up taking these signed platinum framed vinyls to her apartment across the ocean.
Oh no.
Yeah, she had no idea what they were. She just thought they looked cool. And I'm like, you have no idea how valuable these are. Please send them back and give them to me. She's not gonna do it now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Signed platinum vinyl. Wow, I can't talk.
I used to pronounce it vinyl. I used to pronounce it vinyl.
Oh man, what do you think of the new Megadeth singles that they've been dropping recently?
I actually haven't listened to them yet. It is on my list of things to listen to because my grandpa actually passed a couple years ago, and because I know he had a chance to meet Megadeth. I want to connect to him a bit more by listening to Megadeth.
Yeah,
so I have to do. So I'm going to get to that eventually. But I have heard a lot of good things about their new stuff.
Yeah. One of my buddies I always see in streams I'm popping by, Trey Courtney, he's always telling me about the new singles, and I'll go and listen to them. Like they're really good. I didn't expect the new singles to be as good as they are, but definitely worth a listen for sure.
I was telling him about my grandpa meeting Megadeth. Yeah,
that's a really cool opportunity, and like it always happens to the people who like don't know who they are.
Right.
Or stuff like that. But no, it would be really cool to meet guys like Dave Mustaine and shit like that. Because although apparently he can be, it depends on what kind of mood you got him in. Like Fair enough. Can be. And yes, Soul Assassin. I have heard the new Megadeth. I will probably be recording a review of that sometime in the next week.
I will definitely be giving it a listen soon.
Because I've listened to it a couple of times at work, especially, but I want to like really sit down and sit with it and get the details because it's easy to miss stuff. But I really enjoy it. And it's great to see these older bands coming back and doing killer new material in ways that a lot of the rock bands from the 70s, like they had like a couple of really big albums and then never did anything good again. Looking at you, Rolling Stones.
I mean,
they got a magazine named after them.
True, but that was also in like 1970, and then by 76 they kind of Sympathy for the Devil was kind of the last good album.
Yeah, also the magazine doesn't really talk about metal anymore.
No, they don't, and more's the pity.
Loudwire also doesn't seem to talk much about metal these days.
No, they don't. A lot of the freaking metal publications I have a big problem with because they're either like extremely biased or talk about politics all the freaking time instead of the music, which is bullshit. And
yeah,
a lot of the older magazines like Kerrang and stuff like that either aren't around or don't really are just like a digital magazine at this point.
True.
I was checking out Loudwire for a little bit, like around the 2016, but that's when they started getting like more political, and
Yeah, that's
I
when I just
couldn't
kind of tuned them
follow.
out.
Mhm.
Yeah, I couldn't follow him for very long because I was like, this isn't about music. The fuck is going on here? I'm out.
Well, in my
Yeah.
opinion, Revolver magazine and
Mm,
Blabbermouth definitely seem to be consistent these days.
mm,
Yeah. The magazine I always used to love getting. I used to collect some of the artwork, and unfortunately, I think I
mm.
got rid of it years ago. Was Heavy Metal magazine
Okay,
because a lot of that was like it was basically a comic book, but they would
very
also talk
cool.
about
Metal
music,
comics.
yeah, and stuff like that. It was really good, and the
Very
movie was
cool.
great. The movie was freaking awesome.
That's actually one of the songs James Durbin sang in American Idol was
Nice,
Heavy Metal from the movie.
nice. And like that was basically they had a ton of really big names on that soundtrack. You had Blue Oyster Cult, you
Mm,
had freaking Sammy Hagar,
Hmm.
you had Black Sabbath with Ronnie James Dio. Like you had some really top tier talent.
Very true. Even if the movie
Um,
itself wasn't that great.
well, I mean the art style I thought was really cool. Even if a lot of the even if a lot of like the story elements and stuff like that were just kind of like it was a really cool um, art style, and it was really cool to see what you can do with animation and stuff like that if you have the right imagination, and you can just do whatever the hell you want. And it was
mm.
really well done too. Like it's not like the animation you get now where half of it looks like it was done by a 10-year-old.
Well, mentally speaking, most people in cartoons right now are 10 years old.
Fair. That's a very good point.
Good point. Yep.
My husband, the therapist, can explain it more.
Mm,
But no, and like that's a really interesting side of like that's why I love doing like this YouTube thing is we get to be like kind of the underground not news network necessarily, but we're the ones talking about the real stuff
Oh, yes.
when everyone else is just talking about either shill media talking about like whatever we're supposed to enjoy this week,
mm.
and you or trying to shove a political opinion down your throat, and that's in a lot of ways the most anti-metal thing of all time.
I know. Such a paradox.
Like not only like the whole political bullshit, but just being part of the establishment and
Mm.
like and being an establishment part of the genre. It's just like how can you be a part of the establishment when the whole thing is not having one?
I know, right? It is literally a paradox. Or is it an oxymoron?
Right.
Well, I think it depends on who's talking. Oh wait, no, that's just a regular moron. Never mind.
Not bad, not bad.
But no, it's and like they do have. You will see some really good interviews that they do with some of these artists, but you can tell like you can tell there's always that threat of like you say the wrong thing or step out of line and the labels will take away your access.
Yeah.
Whereas I don't have any access, so I can say what the fuck I want.
Boom.
Mm.
And like that's what makes guys like me, Razor Fist, Nick, 70s, like we're just fans talking about shit. So we don't care about having access to the bands, whatever. We don't make a living doing this. So
Right.
we have that level of freedom that a lot of the more established, even YouTube channels don't, like Loudwire or Metal Injection or something like that. Like they can toe the line to a point, and some of them do, but you can always tell like they have to kind of pull their punches a little bit.
Self-censorship. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's always annoying.
And it's the same thing in gaming too. Like a lot of the really big gaming review channels and stuff like that, you can tell they have to kind of say the lines or they won't get early access to the next game, and that puts them on the same footing as us. So that's their business model toast.
Yeah.
Which I think is bullshit, and companies shouldn't be doing that. But
True.
it is what it is. And
Very
like and some of these, and you see it in tabletop gaming too. Like there are companies out there that like Games Workshop's famous for it, where some YouTubers will get preferential treatment because they say things Games Workshop likes. And
Yep.
in the case of people like Arch, if you say the wrong thing, like they will actually try to kill your channel.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
It's insane.
it's nuts, and it's all over a freaking tabletop mini game. Like, come on,
Someone
man.
could literally make a metal song about it.
Actually, that happens. The band Bolt Thrower is actually some of their music is based on 40K.
Cool.
Because
Yep.
when you think about it, 40K is like the freaking. It's like that's where like the power metal, especially, or just heavy metal in general, should eat. Freaking 8 foot tall power armored death machines with a freaking chainsaw with a freaking chainsaw sword.
Yeah, yeah.
Fighting against the forces of hell.
Can't get more metal than that.
That is very true.
It's like you have literal demons in this universe.
Yep.
And you're flying through a gothic church in space.
Exactly, and that has a
Yep.
very important function.
Cool.
In a lot of ways, you can definitely tell Doom takes a ton of influence from the
Oh,
40K universe. I think mainly with the Space Marines, but I mean, how could they not? It's just such a freaking amazing like universe and lore that they've built up.
What really galls me though is when Games Workshop tries to go after anyone like really hard for infringing on their patents and shit like that. It's like, motherfuckers, you stole half of the Imperium of Man straight out of Doom, or out of Dune.
Dune, yeah.
And it's fine. Everybody stole shit from Dune. Like BattleTech did it. Freaking Star Wars did it. Everybody does it because Dune is one of like the most recognized franchises in
Dune actually took elements from Judaism as well.
Yep.
My father-in-law's been trying to get me to read them.
Judaism and Islam, especially, they mixed a lot of that into Dune and did it in a really unique way where it doesn't sound like it's pushing either one of them. It's kind of like they all kind of grew and kind of intermingled.
I think that's why my father-in-law liked it so much, and has been trying to get my husband and I to read them.
Yeah,
and he gave us his copies that are literally falling apart.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow.
But it's a really cool universe, and I can see why they play around with it. But then don't turn around and try to claim other people are ripping you off.
That's just how it happens.
Yeah, it's true. But like it's a really interesting thing, and like some very famous franchises are actually associated with Games Workshop, especially like StarCraft and Warcraft were both supposed to be Warhammer games at their outset.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
They were already like really, really close to finishing, and then the license ran out, or they got into some sort of dispute with Blizzard. So Games Workshop pulled their license from them. So in order to salvage it, they kind of changed some shit around and made it so they weren't infringing on the patent. And that became StarCraft and Warcraft.
That's interesting.
With StarCraft being 40K, and then Warcraft being Warhammer Fantasy, which unfortunately no longer exists.
That makes sense. Yeah. I'd always wondered about that because they built out the lore of Warcraft so much at this point. It's been like 20, 25 years. It's been around.
Oh yeah, I mean, World of Warcraft has been. I think that came out in 2005. So
yeah,
and it's still going.
Not only is it still like that's incredible when you think about it. That you have a game that's not only still going, but still one of the most popular games in its genre, 20 years into its existence, pretty much.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just freaking awesome. I didn't even know that it would originally started out as a 40K franchise. That's cool.
Yeah, they were both. That was really cool, and that actually kind of twigged Relic into designing Dawn of War.
Okay.
Which the first Dawn of War game reminds people a lot of StarCraft because the mechanics are designed to be pretty similar. Because they all saw how popular that StarCraft became. Like it became like the RTS when we were kids.
Oh yeah. So, and now you have like pro Korean players playing tournaments for StarCraft.
Oh yeah, it's nuts, dude. But like that's the cool thing with like you see how like all of this kind of cultural stuff is all just kind of feeds into and off of each other and can spawn into new things.
That is true. That is the joy of creativity.
Yeah, and it's like you never know. Like even if one thing you do isn't like super popular, it can inspire somebody else to do something much bigger. and like then it kind of snowballs from there, where like you have entire bands that respond just either out of a failed band that didn't really go anywhere, or a band that like never really got popular, but these other guys like heard it and were really inspired by it, so then they picked it up and ran with it. That's where black metal came from initially, was like a whole bunch of guys listening to Bathory and realizing, wait, we can do this too. And especially with black metal, part of like the really lo-fi production and stuff like that means you can record. I mean, I think one of Mayhem's albums was recorded like on a tape recorder in their attic.
Huh.
So, when they were like 17. So like the sound quality is terrible, but that's kind of the point. It was kind of a rebellion against like the really polished, more mainstream like hair metal bands. But no, that was and like that was all going on right in the 90s too, like up in the same area. And I think that's kind of a lot of why like you'll see like the aesthetics, especially from the goth scene, kind of bleed over into black metal a lot with like the face paint and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Is they're all kind of in that same ecosystem, as it were. And it's just a matter of how far down that particular rabbit hole you want to go.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
There is so much to explore with Gothicism, especially because it's literally a subculture about self-expression, being yourself, doing whatever the hell you want. A lot of kind of like how, metal is.
Yeah, it kind of took a lot of the aesthetics from the black metal scene and a lot from punk and kind of mixed in the ethos of the metalheads.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's really cool to see how like, it all just develops and changes and turns into its own thing over time. And that's going to continue for a long time, I think, in that we're going to see, we're already seeing a resurgence in like the traditional genres, which means that there's probably going to be a reaction to that coming from the more extreme and underground side of it. So we may see a new resurgence in things like industrial and stuff like that, because these things tend to go in waves. And I can't wait to see that, because like for a while, like especially when like ours when we were kids, freaking like old school metal was like passe. Like you had guys like freaking you had guys like Ronnie James Dio playing clubs.
Yeah, and I entirely blame grunge and Kurt Cobain for that specifically. I mean, sure, respect to him for what he did and like the legacy he left, but fucking he did ruin heavy metal for a lot of us, and it just But
yeah, a lot of the grunge bands, like we grew up with them, and even we're not huge fans of it. Like, although I was pretty young when like Nirvana and stuff was around.
Same, but
I would have been
probably
like 5 or
just
6.
if it was like in the mid-90s, I would have just been born.
Yeah, I was probably 5 or 6 years old when he died, because he died in what, 93?
93. Yeah,
I wasn't even born yet then.
So I would have been 7. So yeah,
they formed their band, I think, was like 89, because they really only had a couple albums and live performances.
And that's how I can tell they were kind of a product of the record industry looking for the next big thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
In that like usually bands have to struggle in the underground for like a couple of years until they get picked up or stuff like that, where these guys formed in 89 and by 1990 they already had an album out.
Yep.
So it's just kind of like
I think with the goth bands that you'll normally find at the goth festivals, especially like Mariluna, I think part of their revenue comes from being paid to be at these festivals.
Oh yeah,
there are quite a lot of them. Like there are, like you go into there's whole sections full of different bands and stages and setups that everyone can have fun at.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of them, that's where they make their money. Like they don't make anything on their records; they make all their money touring.
Oh no, I definitely
selling merch and all that.
GOTHMINISTER actually has gotten a lot more popular in recent years,
which is good. Like it means that they're got staying power.
They definitely do. I guess like they're coming out with their new album next month, which I'm looking forward to for sure. I mean, you'll know what I mean if you've seen the music video for Pandemonium.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I just watched that this morning.
And that's one of the things that metal actually kind of pioneered in the early 80s was the music video. And some bands like go really, really over the top with it. And like, it's really cool to see like what bands come up with. And you do get a feel for like the aesthetic that band really likes in their videos. Cause like, you know, like some of Rammstein's music videos are fucking hysterical. Like they're clearly are one of those bands that just does not take themselves too seriously. Like what is it, the video for I think Kind of Lust, they're all doing the video in fat suits.
I mean, you did say they are a band that literally lights themselves on fire.
Well, yeah, there's that.
They are insane, but that's part of what makes them awesome.
Well, they're German. Yeah, you know.
Good point.
It goes hand in hand. I mean,
yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Like, don't get me wrong, Germany. We all love you, but you're a little odd.
I mean,
hey, great beer
have you
though.
heard their language?
It's very true. It's very true. Well, I think the guys from Rammstein even like were quoted as saying that, like, you know, like certain like languages do like are like just fit really well with certain things, and German is the language of rage and anger.
Huh? Not wrong.
But like it's really cool to see like around the world, like kind of where certain things kind of end up, like, you know, like the thrash bands all kind of emanated and kind of settled out in the US, or a lot of them anyway. You will see a fair number of German bands do thrash. But and then like a lot of the goth bands and stuff like that are all from like, you know, either Scandinavia, Germany. I've seen a couple Italian ones that were pretty cool.
I know Lord of the Lost is German. I actually, or at least I'm fairly certain that they are, because I do know that most of their music is in English.
Yeah, and I wouldn't necessarily peg them as a goth band, but they do kind of have some of these elements as Lacuna Coil.
Oh yeah.
They're kind of an interesting one. You know, they have a pretty cool aesthetic, and they incorporate a lot of interesting styles. And they're from Italy, which is not where you'd normally look for a metal band.
No, definitely not.
Especially like, you know, super Catholic Italy. And they actually do take it seriously over there too. It's not like around here where it's just like yeah whatever.
Yeah.
But like you still see the one thing is, the funny part is like you won't see a lot of bands coming out of England these days. Like there are some, but there's not a ton, which is where it originated.
Yeah.
But you will see absolute freaking hordes of metal bands of all genres coming out of freaking Sweden and Norway.
Definitely.
These guys.
There's a few, but they're more in like the underground sort of like progressive metal, prog metal scene. I know, I think it was called Architects, or it might be a different name, but there was one that Amber Andromeda mentioned that I was listening to a bit. I think it's called Architects, but they're like a whole like instrumental prog rock band. And I mean, the few that do come out of England are pretty good, but like it's pretty rare. I mean, you just don't see them as often as like a lot of the newer bands that we see coming out of different parts of Europe, for sure.
Well, from what I can understand, I will bet I'm willing to place a bet on this that more of these obscure goth bands are actually from the UK.
Wouldn't actually surprise me all that much.
Wouldn't surprise me, yeah.
Because I theorize this because one of those goths that I follow who loves this type of music is British.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know a ton of British metalheads, but like it's where the bands are cracking up, and that's usually where you know, where you'll see like, and some of the scenes, like the scene around here is like there's a bunch of like local bands that they're not very big, and the metal scene around Boston isn't like really huge, but it's really really like they feel really really strongly about it. Like the guys who are in it are fucking in it. Like I've been to some hellish shows at freaking especially a lot of like the local places that just play the local acts, like Sammy's Patio and Revere.
Oh yeah.
And a couple of other places that are basically just a dive bar that has a stage.
Yep. Favorite kind of shows.
Yeah, which is good because we can't have nice things. We can't be trusted with it. We usually break them.
I know the feeling.
Actually, we were just mentioning Susie and the Banshees earlier, Courtney. And that's kind of
one of the literal
of goth.
establishment icons of a modern gothic subculture. Susie Sue.
Yeah, and I haven't like listened to them extensively, but I know there's Like I know a bunch of the Banshee stuff, and it's actually really good. It's kind of a mixture of old school punk and new wave in a lot of ways, which I really enjoy. And one of the band that she mentioned, I think we could probably, at least aesthetically, kind of say is an influence on them, or like that is Typo Negative, because they definitely
I was also thinking Cradle of Filth.
Cradle of Filth as well. They're a little more on the extreme metal side of the house, but yeah, I can see that influence there. And Typo Negative is certainly an influence in a lot of these, because they were really big in the late '80s, early '90s. And then we mentioned Joy Division too. Like this all came out of the '80s like rock and punk scene, and kind of spun into its own thing in the '90s, which is really cool. I don't know that I'd put Manson as a goth, really.
He definitely took aesthetics from the goth.
Oh yeah, but I don't know.
I do remember someone saying that he kind of was part of the gothic genre, but I don't know if that was music wise or just his aesthetic.
Yeah, I mean, I can see arguments either way. Like he does definitely have similar elements in some of his stuff, but it's that line of industrial or goth. Like it's kind of that gray area where it can be one or the other or both at the same time in that kind of range.
Definitely.
And Manson was like, I never really got into Manson because it was more the shock value and the I would say insane outfits and stuff like that, rather than the actual music.
Yeah,
which was like the exact inversion of somebody like Rob Zombie, where like his was mostly focused on the music. And I always loved how it's probably a big influence on the goth aesthetic in that he always included like the horror elements, like old school horror movie elements, into his not only his songs but his stage show and his aesthetic as an artist.
Oh yeah.
And probably Alice Cooper as well, because he used to do a lot of that.
Alice Cooper definitely has the face paint for it.
Oh yeah. Has been doing that since I think the late '70s.
Yeah.
Good for him.
And he definitely, like, not only just a lot of the rock artists, but like a lot of the metal bands really took a lot of aesthetic influences from Alice. Even though he himself was never a metalhead, or was never like a metal artist really.
Mm.
Yeah, but I think it just comes out of a sense of respect for him.
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely. Like almost every metalhead listens to Alice Cooper in one way or another, because it's something that all the bands that we like were listening to. Certainly. And yes, Sambi, we were talking about zombies. You were not included.
Uh-huh.
But no, I mean, like the '90s was kind of an interesting time period too, because you kind of had like a changing of the guard a little bit, in that a lot of the bands that had formed in like the late '70s and early '80s were either taking breaks or breaking up, and you had this kind of industrial scene and goth scene kind of come in and fill in the gaps a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of kept the scene going for a while. In some ways, but in some ways too, it unfortunately led to a lot of like the resentment that we have for a lot of the '90s bands now, because they kind of changed the scene in a way a lot of older metalheads were not fans of, and it's kind of created a big division.
Yeah.
But no, it was. Well, Zambi, when you write a kick-ass gothic metal album, we'll talk about it. But until then, we'll just keep talking about the real zombies.
I mean, I'm pretty sure zombie metal is a thing.
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, you pretty much picture a subgenre of metal. Some band has done it. Like one of the ones I've always enjoyed is pirate metal with Ailstorm.
Ailstorm is good.
Ailstorm is fucking hysterical. They just do not give a shit. It's just a bunch of drunk. It's just a bunch of drunken Scotsmen just doing random stuff and talking.
How
about
much
piracy.
do you want to bet they record drunk?
I would not
100%.
put any money on that. They would absolutely record drunk. They probably play hammered half the time.
Yeah.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. It's all over their lyrics.
Oh yeah.
I would define them as like the epitome of party metal
Oh yeah.
because they're drunk most of the time and they sing about getting drunk.
Pretty much, and
Uh,
like, and
Shouldn't
it's
they
just a
be
really
from
fun thing.
Ireland then, not Scotland?
No,
No.
the Scots fucking do a lot of that themselves.
Yeah, but Ireland is more known for it.
This is true,
This is true. Yeah.
but no, but it's really cool to see like these little niche genres and like people just experimenting with new shit. Like you'll have like a lot of Irish punk too, like Dropkick Murphys from my area. I've seen them a ton of times, and it's interesting. Like you'll have like pretty much no matter what you're into, there's a band out there for you.
Definitely.
I mean, there's bands that sing in every language of the rainbow and freaking just have all sorts of styles from, there is still hair metal bands, even if the best of them exists to be a parody of hair metal in Steel Panther.
True.
Like they basically exist to be a parody of heavy metal, but they end up being a kick-ass metal band in and of themselves.
Yeah.
Now that's a paradox.
Well, it's really not, because metal is very willing to make fun of ourselves. Like, let's put it like there's a lot of bands in the genre that just don't take themselves too seriously and are willing to have fun at their own expense.
True. Very true.
Like I used to have the picture up on my Gilded somewhere of it's like these Bruce Dickinson and Steve Harris from Iron Maiden. It's like they just have these like T-shirts. It's just like, we are definitely not an English rock band. We are Bible salesmen from Montana, or something like that.
Bible salesmen.
Like anyone's gonna buy that.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just kind of one of those funny things where there's just doing shit for the fun of it. And that's, I think, when genres start to fade is when you can no longer laugh at yourselves and it becomes like a more serious, like stoic, artistic endeavor, rather than just a bunch of fun-loving people out there having a good time, riffing with each other and just thoroughly enjoying it. I think when it becomes a process and it becomes an industry of itself is where the fun dies.
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
Which I think is also why the metal scene kind of got mainstream in the 80s and then abruptly stopped, because it kind of went completely counter to the ethos. And I think after the 80s, a lot of bands had to like step back and kind of reevaluate where the scene was at and whether this is an avenue we should continue going down. And in the meantime, like I said, you had the goth and industrial scenes and a lot of groove metal coming in, like bands like Meshuggah, freaking Pantera, certainly, and early Korn and stuff were kind of filling in that genre with a new, because that was their chance to kind of have that new sound that was very different than what came before.
For a moment, I thought you said Noose, and I thought that would be the perfect name for a metal band.
I'm pretty sure there probably is one out there somewhere.
Probably with one of those name labels that you can't even read.
Oh yeah, like the death and black metal labels are freaking hilarious these days, where like they get more and more extreme with the freaking font.
Yeah,
it's just like that's not even a word. That is literally just a bunch of squiggly lines you scratched into the concrete.
But it works.
It does, and some of it's pretty cool too. Like where they'll like put like interweave different like patterns into it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
High Lung, even though they're not technically metal, they do it with antlers.
I really do enjoy their music though. It's like a very traditional,
is beautiful, and Maria Franz has the voice of a goddess.
Yeah. Like I do like a lot of that, like more traditional Scandinavian music and stuff like that, because it's very traditional. It's very primal in a lot of ways.
That is what they're going for.
And it's a little more raw and kind of unpretentious, where it's just like it's a bunch of people playing like kind of historic instruments.
Indeed, including human bones.
The interesting thing I find, and I think it's because of the label that they're signed on as well, but anytime they're doing tours, they're pretty much playing tours with a bunch of other metal bands. Like it's the genre they really fit into, but they're not. I don't know if you can really consider them metal at all.
No, they call themselves Amplified History.
Yeah, I can see that.
They're technically folk music. If you really want to give them a genre.
Yeah, even
But
though they don't really fit into folk
but
as a
they
genre,
you
but
could call them metal because they
yeah,
literally play their music with human bones. You
True,
can't
that
get
is
yeah,
one
more
of the
metal
most
than
metal
that.
things.
You
That
can't
is
get
one.
any more metal.
Let's say that is one of the most metal things I've ever heard.
yeah.
But no, I mean it's a cool genre, and it's
Hmm.
again, it's interesting to see people explore like a little bit different musical styles and do something that is going against the grain, and it's not going to be popular, but to the people who are into that kind of thing, it's freaking awesome.
Hmm. I love
Like
heavy.
there's a lot of Norwegian bands I'm into. Like I saw a couple at Metal Fest in 2016 in Worcester. Like Leaves Eyes, I think were on their first North American
Ooh,
tour.
yeah,
They're
they're
really
good.
good.
I
They're
remember
really
them
good.
from their original singer. After their original singer Norwegian singer left, I kind of was like, doesn't sound the same.
I mean, it doesn't sound bad, but I do agree. I like their original singer better.
Mm.
And their male lead vocalist is fucking enormous. I actually bought him a beer because they were out in the back of the crowd, and like he's probably like 6'6". This man makes me look tiny,
Mm.
Wow.
and
Yeah, that's tall.
like it's kind of hard to see that when you're um like when they're up on stage. It's kind of hard to get a read on like they're just how physically big some of these guys are, but some of them are enormous, just giants. And then you have guys like Ronnie James Dio, who was like 5'6", and yet you would never know it by how he freaking sings.
No, that's what platinum boots are for.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
That's why I love my platform boots.
And then a lot of the genres too are kind of intermingling with each other, where you'll have like a mixture of different musical styles. Like you'll have a lot of gothic / symphonic metal.
There's also folk metal.
Yep.
Like Eluvate, I think, is one of
Yeah,
those.
Eluvate is really great.
Mm-hmm.
They're very good.
So I'm not a huge fan of their vocal style, but their musicality is freaking great.
They have a freaking hurdy-gurdy along with a violin.
Yeah, which is which I think is hilarious. It's just like they're playing the music. Obviously, these people are not doing it for the money. They're doing it because they actually think it's cool and really want to. And
yeah,
let's face it,
it's really
awesome,
rare.
though.
It's really rare to find a hurdy-gurdy musician these days.
Yeah.
And let's face it, if you want to make money playing music, you don't play heavy metal.
No, you just sign your soul to a label company.
Mm.
Although fortunately, we are seeing less and less of that, because with the distribution of YouTube and all these other platforms, you can self-publish a lot easier than you used to, and recording has never been more decentralized than it has been than it ever has been. Like it's because nowadays you have software that's almost as powerful as the pros use that you can run on a normal PC and can kind of do your own shit if you're willing to put in the effort and learn how to do it. And you'll have bands that will self-produce and just skip the label. Like Dan Vasc is a perfect example.
Tom McDonald too.
Yep, and Dan, both with Fearless and also with his own stuff, like he just kind of like, no, I'm not going to have a label. We do what we do. People, our fans know who we are. And when you get 670 something thousand people that are subbed to you on YouTube, well,
it's a good audience.
It's apparently working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We are definitely entering the era where like record labels are becoming a thing of the past, and they just have to change their model entirely if they still want to survive. Because
I don't think they ever truly adapted to the internet age, because like remember, like right when the internet first started, you had things like Napster and LimeWire and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And they never really got past that.
Really, the only labels that I've seen, they started out as like labels for underground bands that over time have gotten big and have signed like bigger bands, but are still very niche. Like they're only like particular to their genre. Like, but if you look at like labels like fucking Metal Blade Records that started in the 80s as like an underground label, like signed some really big bands now. They're one of the few.
Weren't they Slayer's label when they first started?
Yeah. That was Slayer's label.
Slayer!
I think they had a deal to sign Metallica too at the beginning, but they didn't. Like that deal fell through or something like that.
Yeah, I know they were associated like they were big in the early thrash scene.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of the like newer metal bands that I listen to are usually either signed on Metal Blade or Sumerian's another big one. But yeah, yeah, Soul Assassin's right. Self-publishing, that's really the way to go these days because yeah, for the most part, the way labels work, they're more for like publishing more than anything. It's just getting your records out there, like manufacturing the records and like getting them put out there. Like everything else, like most bands just do it themselves. Like I've talked to the main guy that heads up and writes up all the music for Born of Osiris, and he says like he pretty much writes all the music himself. He produces it all himself. Like they manage and book their tours themselves. Pretty much like the only thing that the label really does, as far as I know, is like getting them booked on bigger tours and like getting their albums put out there, and that's basically about it. Like helps them with the funding and stuff too. But yeah,
Well, and again, with like the
it's a
rise
lot of
of like YouTube and stuff like that, a lot
yeah,
less and less of this stuff is physical media now.
yeah. It's all
So they've
digital.
because it
Very
used
true.
to be back in the day that like if you wanted to print your own records, you had to go through a label because it was so expensive, and a lot of companies wouldn't just wouldn't deal with you.
Yeah, yeah,
That you had to go through that. They were kind of the gatekeepers of music in a lot of ways of who got signed and who didn't. And
nowadays.
nowadays, you can just put
Mhm.
your music out on SoundCloud or Spotify or YouTube
Yep.
and see how it does.
And
Very true.
there's services like DistroKid that you'll sign up for. It's just a small little company that basically just does the distribution for you, puts it up on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, like all the services that are out there. And you just like admit the music to them, and it puts it out to all those people. So there's almost not a need for record labels anymore. Like they kind of have to adopt to the whole internet model in order to survive, which is yeah, that's why.
And a lot of it too. I don't think. I mean, a lot of the bigger labels, they're really just coasting on inertia at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
And in
Like,
the case of like Napalm Records or Nuclear Blast, like they're two of the
mhm.
biggest labels in metal right now, and they have some of the top acts. So
Yeah, yeah.
they're kind of going. But I think some of the bigger ones, like if you notice, like the bigger ones, like RCA, I think RCA is gone. But
RCA is gone.
like Capitol Records, Sony, like they're all really
Atlantic.
kind of Atlantic Records, like they're all kind of dwindling into the background. Like they're not really
Mhm.
a thing anymore.
Yeah, yeah. Like they still sign like the main like pop artists that you see on the radio or hear on the radio, I should say, see on the radio. Like they still sign some of those like big mainstream acts, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
but
becoming a relic
and I
basically.
don't, and it's certainly a organization as big as like Sony or Capitol Records. You can't support a company that of the size and power that Capitol used to be
Mhm.
on what they make out of record sales now. Because
Very
I mean,
true.
it's like as much as I do like that, like the new distribution model, they don't get paid a lot. Even when people like buy their songs on iTunes or whatever, like they don't really get paid much for per song. Like, and that economy's kind of changed quite a bit.
Mhm.
And yeah, Jaffo's right. Where a lot of the legacy labels are basically coasting on their existing catalog
Yep.
of like
Yep.
if you own the rights to a Judas Priest or Megadeth or something like that, like you can just kind of coast on that because those albums will always sell well.
Yeah.
True.
Yeah.
And especially with shows like this or just how the metal how the metal scene works in general, you're constantly having new people come in and listen to these bands for the first time and buying the records because that's part of being part of the culture is like you really get into it.
Mhm.
And that's really what they're making their money on at this point is the back catalogs for a lot of their older bands which does give them a little bit of leeway in who they can sign as like a younger artist, but it also tends to make them really exploitive because like they're always looking for that next big thing that they can really exploit for a quick buck.
Also true.
And fortunately now a lot of those bands can basically tell them to fuck off and go their own self-publishing route like Dan did.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of ways, like they're losing that control. And it used to be almost like a cartel where if like the major labels didn't want you, you'd get stuck on this underground label like Metal Blade or Nuclear Blast in like the 90s. And you wouldn't always be kind of that like second tier artist.
Except I think Nuclear Blast is a lot more popular these days.
Well, yeah, they have some of the biggest metal bands in the world now, but they were all, but when they signed them, they were all nobodies.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So I think that them and Napalm kind of rode that to success in a lot of ways.
Yep.
Definitely.
And it's really cool too how like some of the labels kind of specialize in different sounds. Like Napalm Records is really big in the symphonic scene. Nuclear Blast is like pretty much the official label of power metal.
Yep.
And there's a bunch of like, smaller ones and I think that's where the record labels are going to survive is, where they're more supportive of a specific genre, and that's kind of what they do. And they're constantly trying to find new acts in that vein, rather than like a Sony or a Capitol Records that's looking for the next thing to break into the mainstream and sell 3 million albums. Because especially in the rock and metal genre, I think those days are behind us. Unless you see a real resurgence in the rock scene, which we are starting to.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You can say that, yeah.
But I think these things take a lot of time, and a lot of the culture has kind of shifted away from rock to more country and stuff like that. But it's hey, things can come and go. So, just like Westerns, I think we're on the rise again.
Oh yeah.
And
can't go wrong with Westerns.
No, you can't. And it gets to a point where you hit a saturation point in the culture too. This happened to a lot of stuff in the 80s where, like, especially a lot of the mainstream metal acts, like every week there was a new, like, Warrant or Dokken or somebody like that. And I think it just got to a saturation point where people just kind of had enough of it. And Soul Assassins, right? Like, Napalm's signing a ton of new talent.
I've seen a lot of stuff from them that, definitely looks very new.
Yeah. And, well, a lot of it, too, is bands that have been around a while but are starting to release new content again, especially after the lockdowns were over and all that. Well, a lot of these bands have been writing on their own for the last 2 years. And Fizz is right when it says, when I say saturation point, like, look at the superhero genre of movies now, where we kind of got through that age of real popularity, where everyone was in a rush to go see the next big superhero movie because it was the next big spectacle or something like that. And now we've kind of hit the phase where people just kind of don't care anymore. Yeah, and I think Westerns went through that in the 70s, and they kind of just became less and less common because, back in the 60s and 70s, every other week there was a new Western movie out. So it's just like, you want to see something different after a while. And I think that's one of the things we're seeing in metal now is kind of a return to that older style and that older ethos. And that's a very good thing in my mind, because those were some of the highlights of the genre. And it'll be interesting to see how a new generation reacts to it and adds their own thing into the scene.
Yeah, I think my cousin might end up being one of those. My cousin, who is the only metalhead out of all my relatives now that my grandfather passed. But yeah, he's into more of the older bands, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Metallica, all those. And he has real musical talent. He plays guitar and drums.
Cool.
And literally, honestly, I can see him being part of one of the bigger bands someday.
Yeah, a lot of guys are coming into bands that are either already established as a younger guy, like Richie Faulkner from Judas Priest is the perfect example, where he's 20 years younger than they are, and I think bands need that from time to time, where you need a new perspective added in and adding kind of, adding that young blood into the unit. rather than, you know, just kind of keep doing the same thing you've been doing for the last 20 years.
Yeah, but this particular cousin has always had a lot of energy, and and I know he has this passion for music because we literally talk about music when we see each other.
Yeah,
He was actually so surprised when I told him I had finally started listening to Slayer. He was like, "Have you been under a rock the whole time I've known you?"
Yeah, it's always funny when like somebody like, especially with some of the big ones. Like with some of the big bands, like it's really rare to find out with somebody who you haven't listened to that hasn't listened to them.
Like I said, I got him to listen to Lamb of God. He had never heard of them before until I mentioned it, and that was actually right when Iron Maiden's "Writing on the Wall" came out. I listened to the song, I liked it. Told my cousin who loves Iron Maiden that we have something new to jam to. And he said, "Oh yeah, I've actually been listening to some Lamb of God. They're not bad." And I said, "Told you so." Basically, yeah, we introduced each other to new bands. That was awesome.
Yeah. And like, that's always really cool too. But it is interesting because we don't get the opportunity to talk about, like, you know, like Slayer or stuff like that all that much to people who haven't already heard it. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of one of those like, oh, yes, I get to corrupt someone new.
It was more like he actually gave me this actually shocked look that I had never heard of Slayer until then.
Yeah, and Soul Assassin's right. There is some like the really elitist people will like just shit on you for not having heard a band. That's why it's important to like us to remember that, you know, yes, we've been in the genre for 25 years or whatever. There's people coming in all the time that this is their first show or this is their first band. Mm-hmm. So I think I always try to like really encourage people to listen to newer stuff and listening to different stuff than they've heard before, because it kind of develops where, you know, everyone's at a new point in their journey with music. And, you know, just because they haven't heard this doesn't mean they're not really a fan or whatever. Like, it took me a long time to really get into some of the black metal stuff. Like, I used to stay away from it. It wasn't really my thing. And then I heard like everyone has that moment where it just clicks for them. Mm-hmm. Like, I think with me, it was the first time, like when I heard like some of the OG stuff, like Bathory. And I was just like, okay, I get it now. I get where this came from and I get where it's going. And ever since, I do actually like a lot of black metal, but it took me a while to get into it.
Yeah. For me, it's been like more of a gradual path because, like I said, I grew up in a very religious community. Yeah. Orthodox Jewish community. They don't have metal. There's no such thing as Jewish metal. Unfortunately, I need to make it a thing. But
I mean, there's probably a market for that.
I started with alternative rock music, okay? That's how long it's taken me to get into proper metal. I was in middle school when I started alternative rock, starting with Evanescence and Linkin Park. Rest in peace, Chester Bennington.
Yeah. I mean, those guys were new when I was a kid. Like, they were coming in and doing just really different things with, you know, like you say, alternative and mainstream, kind of the more mainstream side of rock. When you used to actually still see this on MTV every day.
Yeah.
Yes.
MTV was actually a music channel.
Yes. I'm that old. I remember when MTV still had actual music. That was many, many moons ago. I mean, I haven't even seen MTV in the last like probably 15 years.
And within the past 15 years, they have had their own TV series, including the reboot of Teen Wolf, which is actually very good.
Oh, is it?
It's getting a movie now.
Interesting.
The TV show of Teen Wolf is now getting a continuation movie that looks like it's going to continue from the end of season 6. And I am looking forward to it because I really liked that Teen Wolf show.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out because, like, you know, I'm always in the mood.
It was literally broadcasted on MTV.
Oh, I mean, once MTV stopped doing music, I just kind of stopped paying attention to them.
Now I've introduced you to something that you might like.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. And I'm always that, like, me and Fish Chozo talk about anime every now and again. Like, I'm kind of more one of the old school, like, 80s and 90s guys.
If you want a metal anime, From Commonplace to World's Strongest.
Okay, I'll check that out.
The aesthetic of the main character is very metal.
Yeah, Soul Assassin. I remember watching TRL every day after school when I was in like middle school. And you would actually see bands like Korn like up in the top spot. And
Wow, I'm young.
yeah, and you're probably too young to even remember when the show
I'm
was
26.
on, Raven. Yeah, I'm 35, so yeah, Headbangers Ball. I remember I was young, but I remember watching it every now and again, and you would see some really really kick-ass artists on there.
Yeah, I remember that back in the day.
And like it was a really good place to go for like kind of the less mainstream side of music.
Yeah.
And MTV was actually really good at that because you kind of took a cross section of a lot of different shows or a lot of different genres, and you kind of got a little bit of everything on there in terms of their programming, and that kind of like just kind of let you pick what you want.
Mm-hmm.
One of the other things that introduced me to classic metal was Supernatural.
Yep.
Because Dean was a classic metalhead.
Absolutely.
And every season finale, they had Kansas singing "Carry On, Wayward Son."
Oh hell yeah.
Yep.
But that was a great show in general. At least the first, up until like season
I actually have
10
not finished season 14 and have not yet seen season 15. But I heard the ending sucked.
Yeah, a lot of people weren't happy about it.
I can't remember where I fell off, but I think I watched like 5 or 6 seasons because I started out watching it when it first showed up on air. I really liked it, but yeah, I don't know.
Although one song I've never heard, I would be perfect for Supernatural, and I'm surprised they didn't use it. Was "God Was Never on Your Side" by Motorhead.
Huh.
Oh yeah,
they did have Blue Oyster Cult's "Don't Fear the Reaper" and then with an actual Reaper.
Yeah, and then I think they did I think they've done Motorhead songs in there too, but like that is a perfect one for some of the later plot lines. It's just like, how have you never used this track?
No idea. That's a waste. You're right. That's a wasted opportunity.
Yeah, especially given like the later seasons, it's like, yeah, God was never on your side.
Yeah, you actually meet God, and it turns out He doesn't care.
Yep. And but no,
which in Jewish culture is contradictive because everything was literally created by God. Everything exists by the will of God, and if God didn't care, nothing would exist.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, a lot of the more interesting, more metaphysical side of Judaism and Christianity is really interesting, and Islam as well. Like they have some really interesting like metaphysical stuff. It's more like spiritual and metaphysics than it is
Islam
like
and
religion.
But Islam and Christianity do not have the endless commentaries that my religion does.
True.
Be grateful.
And although, I mean, early on in Christianity, there's, especially when you have like, the monasteries and stuff like that, there was guys who had nothing better to do all day than sit around and philosophize about the meaning of God and stuff like that. It's what they literally got paid to do. And yeah, I mean, Motorhead is really that band that like everybody can point to.
Oh yeah, that's true. I've seen a meme about that.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, like that's one of the famous memes in the metal circle of just like the punks and metalheads and rockers can all just kind of like Motorhead. All right, but yeah, I actually have to run here pretty soon, so I think we're gonna start wrapping this up. And
yeah, I am glad I got to introduce you guys to a new band.
Absolutely, and before I let you guys go, let's see what you got going on. Herbs, what are you doing this week?
Yeah, so I'll have weekly Warzone streams on Twitch with Lethal Lightning and Blabbering Collector, streamers for geeks and gamers. So I'll be doing that this week, and then I'll probably have a couple of my own streams that I'll be doing this week as well. Didn't get to stream a lot last week just because I was really busy, like a bunch of stuff going on. But yeah, I'm gonna go back to streaming this week. So yeah, tomorrow look out for that on twitch.tv/Sergeant Herbs. And yep. That's what I got going on. I'm chilling like always. Yeah.
Kick ass. All right. Raven, what do you got going on?
Well, I am going to be working on house chores and writing, obviously. But you can actually, if you look onto my Wattpad, my co-authored story To Mend a Heart about Count Dracula's children, one of my characters is actually a metalhead who it becomes the frontrunner of a band.
Oh, very cool.
And I do actually write that into the story at some point. So if you guys want to read about a metalhead, I would suggest looking that up on my Wattpad at Gothic Writer 613. You can also follow me and my husband on Twitter and on our YouTube channel, Gothic Therapy. My husband is in the middle of editing our video today, so that should be out later this afternoon.
Awesome. And then as for me, you guys all know where to find me every Sunday on here for Rock and Roll Religion, for more of this glorious bullshittery. And then sometime and during the week, every other Monday, you can catch me on That 70s Rock Fans channel for It's Only Talk and Roll. And then I'm sometimes on Foul Ball Productions, MF for Cocktail Lounge, if I stay up that late, which almost never happens. Yes, I'm old and cranky. I get to go to bed early now. And other than that, I do stream on Twitch every now and again. So if you give me a follow over there, over at Pope_Metallicus, I usually do BattleTech or some 40K related stuff over on there, or just whatever game I really feel like you guys should get a look at. And I won't be doing much of that going forward because I'm going to be moving. So a lot of my computer stuff is going to be like, ad hoc and where I can set it up and all that. So I'll probably be doing some of that, maybe not this week, but probably down the line. So make sure to follow me over there. And as always, chat, you guys have been fucking awesome. Like whatever we don't know, the chat usually will. And they always make great have some pretty good insights on this stuff. And hell, some of the people that are in the chat have either been on the show or I met in chat and have been on the show after. So it's a really great thing to talk to you guys. And I love doing this. Like, it's just such a great thing to just
I had fun.
Sit down and talk music with people. Because now that the record stores are all gone, it's not something we get to do much of.
Yeah.
But with that all being said, I'll see you guys next week. So take care, stay safe. I love you all. And I'll catch you next time.
Bye.